are so excited to have Sam here, who is an incoming cloud technical resident at Google, and he's going to share his experience about navigating the recruitment process, give you his tips, a little bit of motivation, and just help you get to know him. So, Sam, could you give us a little bit of an introduction about yourself, where you're from, maybe a little bit about your background and story?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, it's matter to thank you for being here. It's a pleasure to be here. One of the things that I love doing is sharing my experience with international students. As a matter of fact, I had a company for about 2 years called Student Mentor, where we actually did something similar, helping international students succeed in the U.S. So overall, I am super grateful to be here, and I'm excited to share everything that I know. As you briefly mentioned, I am an international student from Colombia and Brazil, and I'm an incoming cloud technical resident at Google. I am a computer science major at a small university in the Midwest called Morningside College. And in a nutshell, that's pretty much about me. Yeah, that's kind of a good introduction of myself.
Okay, great. So kind of what led you to making the big decision to come to America, all the way from home?
Yeah, so since I was very young, since I was like 8 years old, I've been playing tennis. Well, I quit playing tennis about 2 years ago to dedicate to rock climbing. But ever since I was eight, I used to play tennis. And my family always knew that there was a possibility for me to get a scholarship to play tennis here in the US. So when the time came, we did the whole process. They helped me with the application process, and I ended up getting a full ride scholarship here at Morningside College to play for their tennis team. So I came, and after 2 years, I ended up quitting the tennis team. Just I wasn't feeling tennis anymore, but we knew that it was always a possibility. So that was always in the radar. But I think the main motivator was just to be here for the opportunities, the economic opportunities, and mainly because I've always been super passionate about startups and technology. And I knew that even though, of course, the US has a lot of challenges, this continues to be the place to be at if you want to thrive in those areas. So that's kind of the main motivator that came into play for me to come to the US.
No, I feel similarly. I didn't have the athletic skills to get here, but definitely felt the need to grow my career and move to the US for that reason. What did you study when you came in? Did you know from the beginning that's what you wanted to do, or did you have any, major changes as you were learning new things?
Yeah, so I came in as exploring student. I actually didn't know what I wanted to major in. I thought I wanted to major in business because I had a lot of affinity for startups, and I always loved business. I've been trying to start businesses since I was like 16 or so. So I actually took a couple business classes and I hated it. Not because I hated business per se, but I hated the way business is taught. Later on, I went on to realize that I think I mean, this may be controversial depending on who listens to this, but I don't think business is a skill that you teach. Business is a skill that you learn in practice. So I just realized that it wasn't. Most of the classes that I was taking in business felt like common sense to me. Not again, this is not to to talk poorly about anyone doing business or anything. It's just it didn't resonate with me.
Yeah.
So I wanted to try different things. I ended up taking a computer science class. I've always enjoyed technology, but I ended up taking a computer science class, and I simply just fell in love with it, and been at it ever since.
Wow. So I know kind of from my experience too, the whole process of recruiting can be daunting. And so my question for you is really what was your process when you started recruiting, and when did you really begin that process, so to say?
You mean recruiting for a job or recruiting to come to the US?
I would say recruiting for a job.
Okay. Yeah, so I think every summer since 2018 or so, I've been trying very hard to get an internship, either as a software engineer or as a product manager, and I failed every single time. I didn't get any. I currently have an internship with the Department of Natural Resources of my state, but I never landed a big internship at a big tech company throughout my years here. So, but I always tried. So I think the recruitment process technically started back then because back then I was already preparing to get a job, whether it be an internship or a full-time job. I was already preparing my technical skills, preparing my networking skills, building my network, building my resume, and kind of prepare myself as a candidate to be able to eventually get a job. Even though I failed at getting the internships, I would say that my development process as a professional started back in 2018 or so. And in terms of a timeline, recently to get to land the job that I landed at Google, my recruitment process started in the fall of 2020, around August or so. I was already kind of planning, okay, what's going to be my timeline, and what are the companies, the roles, the positions that I'm going to be applying for, because usually most of the big tech companies have a recurring schedule that to start in the fall of a year, you usually start the recruitment process in the fall of the previous year. So that's kind of usually how things go. So yeah, that's a little bit of my timeline there.
Okay, super cool. So before going in, I know you said that you never got like a big tech internship before you started or before you accepted this job with Google, but before going into any recruiting process, be it earlier or in the fall, did you have a list going in beforehand, or were you kind of open to niche companies? How did that work for you?
Yeah, so I always had lists. I always like to organize my application processes through lists, and that list got more refined as time went on. So at the beginning, I tried to, for a couple of the initial internships that I applied for, I was dividing my companies in like tiers, so like tier A, tier B, tier C. I applied for all the big tech companies, all the startups that I was most excited about, and I had like backup options, and like I had like option A, option B, and option C. That was kind of one of the ways that I was dividing my companies and my applications. I was open to a lot of opportunities. I ended up again not getting any, but I was open to a lot of the opportunities, and I was very organized always in my application process. I didn't like just randomly applying. I wanted to know why I was applying for the company and how I was organizing my applications in a general sense.
No, I love that. I feel like it's always important to like be able to keep track, especially sometimes you forget you applied to something and then you might get an interview and you're like, wait, what was the position? And, to be able to recall it's important. So I know like as an international student, like me too, on an F1 visa, sometimes, I've been in this boat where you're interviewing at a great company or speaking to someone and then unfortunately they're unable to sponsor. So when an employer let you know, like, hi Sam, sorry, like we're unable to sponsor your visa, how did you stay motivated, or what kind of kept you going when you heard responses like that?
Well, even in those cases, I just made it very clear that I wasn't seeking the sponsorship whatsoever. Mostly for internships, like if someone told me, sorry, we don't hire international students for internships because we don't sponsor visas, like that just shows me that the person doesn't have a clue of what they're talking about. So in a general sense, I just, first of all, I understood that there's a lot of employers. When you talk to big companies, I don't think this is gonna happen as much. But when you talk to medium-sized companies and even small local companies, there's a lot of people who are going to be clueless about what it takes to hire an international student. So even for OPT, you don't need a sponsorship. If that's something that matters to you, then of course you should be shooting for a company that's going to sponsor you in the long term. But if you just want to do your OPT somewhere, or even if you're just looking for an internship, I think acknowledging that you're going to have to do a lot of education of the employers is important. So I learned how to advocate for myself, and that was actually a thing that we really try to teach our students with Steven Mentor was you need to learn how to advocate for yourself. You need to learn how to explain to the employer that you're talking to that, hey, I don't need a sponsorship to be able to do an internship with you guys. So or yes, you can hire me the same way pretty much that you will hire any other domestic student. So a lot of that educational aspect of getting a job is important for international students to be prepared to do.
No, that's such a great answer. Honestly, I feel like sometimes even in my process, that's not something I did as much because I was always either worried or when especially when I was a junior for an internship, I would feel a little bit shut down and then just move to the next one. So definitely that's such a great point in the education aspect. I didn't do as much of that as I think I could have, given how much knowledge I know about OPT now. So I know you're super well-rounded and now you're incoming at Google, but you did mention that you got, a couple of rejections. So could you maybe walk us through, how you dealt with these rejections and maybe, if you learned something from them that helped you in interview that was to come?
Yeah. So uh just to have an idea, just at Google, I got rejected 3 times before I
Oh,
before I got my full, including internships. Only at Google. For other, I genuinely don't know the number of them, the amount of companies that I got rejected for. I can have an idea. I think for full-time positions, I think I got rejected over 20 times or something. But like I've been getting rejected my whole life. Not only for job positions, but for other things that I tried. And very early on in my process, and actually, I wrote an essay on this topic reflecting a little bit on my journey to get this job at Google. And in the essay, I talk about the way that I dealt with failures. And back in 2017, I really had my first year of college here in the US, I really had a very deep mindset shift about failures. And I stopped seeing failures as something negative and rather as a step forward. Anytime that I felt at something big, I would genuinely, like literally celebrate. I would go out to eat. I would buy myself something that I was looking for. Whatever. I would actually celebrate every time that I failed. And I would keep track of every single big failure and keep track of a small lesson that the failure taught me. And it was pretty much a way for me to force myself to look at failures as signs of progress as opposed to signs of failures. And that really changed the way that I looked at failures overall. I tried starting a couple of companies, didn't work out. I tried applying for a couple of startup accelerators, didn't work out. I tried transferring, that didn't work out. I tried getting multiple internships, none of those worked out. And every time that I failed, yeah, it sucked, but it was like, okay, I'm moving forward. I'm a step closer. Keep going, keep going, keep going. And ever since I started counting failures, I can count 19 major failures in my life, like major, not just like, oh, I wanted to get an A and I got a B, like major failures. Like I invested months into whatever I'm doing and I failed. And those 19 failures is kind of what got me to this point. So if you're expecting to get a job, you need to get mentally prepared to deal with failures, and you need to get mentally prepared to use failures as a propelling force. Otherwise, yeah, otherwise it's not gonna happen.
No, I agree. I think for me too, is like at some point, it's not even failures, but employers may not be responding. So you don't know what that means. And you're just kind of waiting and to just like keep going and keep, networking and trying new things. I think very exciting, and congratulations if I haven't said it already for incoming at Google. I think it's so exciting, not just the perks, but I think, the learning opportunities and how much they invest in like you growing and being able to participate and do things that are like outside of just your field. I think that's something that I think of Google that's really interesting. But going into this interview process, but all the other interviews that you maybe took, how did you really prepare for an interview process at any company?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of understanding the process itself. So when I was applying for the full-time positions that I was applying for last semester, I was applying for two main positions, for software engineering positions and for product manager positions. Actually, my main focus was actually product management positions, product management roles. So you need to understand what is the process and what is the structure of the interview process for product management, or in this case, if you want to get into software engineering, you need to understand the structure of the interview process for software engineering. And then just build a plan, pretty much build what is the timeline that you have, what are the things that you need to do by when, and go at it. Just put in the work. I just think the having a timeline and having a time frame is really important to guide your studying process. So, for instance, when I was preparing for many of the product management interviews, I really went on to, okay, what are the questions that I'm going to get asked? What are the style of questions? How am I going to tackle every single question? What is going to be my framework? Or for software engineering positions, for instance, okay, when am I going to start interviewing? What are some of the things that I need to review? What are some of the algorithms that I feel weak at that I need to review? How many exercises do I want to do on lead code for every single algorithm? So it's pretty much like designing a study plan for you based on the things that you still need to develop and the time frame that you have. And that's pretty much what I did for my whole application process last semester.
Oh, intense, but clearly it worked out. Were you ever networking before the interview process, or after you got the interview, were you just kind of preparing for the technical and soft skill aspect?
Yeah, so I'm glad you mentioned the networking part, because that is an implicit requirement for all of this stuff to happen. I've been super involved with startups since freshman year. I've met incredible people. I've entered in amazing communities in the startup world in the US, not only my city, but in the whole country. And I know a lot of people. Like, I have a really, really big network for someone that is a senior in college in undergrad, whether it is an international student or whether it is a domestic student. I know a lot of people because of the things that I did in the past. And all of that, the connections that I built allow me to get interviews, allow me to prepare for my interviews, and allow me to just be in a better position overall. I think a good example of this is that for the whole interview process at Google, I was preparing with a friend of mine who is a software engineer at Google, and he was helping me prepare for the technical process to understand Google's culture, and he was just overall kind of helping me get an important insider look into the company. And I only met this friend because of all the connections that I ended up building throughout my years in college. So I'm not saying necessarily that you need to prepare with someone at the company. Of course, it is helpful, but I'm just saying that it is a lot. Things get a lot harder if you just go through the formal interview. Things get a lot harder if you don't know anyone. Things get a lot harder if you don't have a network. So having someone to either refer you or someone to help you prepare or something like that is essential. And those relationships, they don't pop up just by messaging someone on LinkedIn. You have to build those relationships. You have to actually have something in common, and that doesn't happen in a month that you're looking for a job. That's a work you should have started back in freshman year,
Yeah.
as I think you did.
Okay, cool. So a lot of times in these interviews, I've experienced some in the soft skills section where they ask you more like arbitrary questions, or potentially in a technical interview where they're asking you a detailed question that you may not know the answer to. How do you approach something like that in the moment?
Yeah. So one of the things that I was really adamant about when I was preparing for the interviews wasn't necessarily to know the answer for everything, but to have a system to tackle every possible question. So more so than I get asked, I don't know, solve this algorithm, more so than already knowing the answer for the problem. I just wanted to have a solid system that would help me tackle that problem specifically. So in a sense, a big recommendation that I'm trying to give to people that I'm asking me for advice on LinkedIn and have been reaching out to me in the last couple months ever since I announced that I got this position at Google is you need to study what you need to study in order to feel confident. So like you need to do what you gotta do to feel confident. If that means over studying for 3 weeks or 3 months, do it. Like you need to feel confident during the interview. But more so than feeling like you need to have the answer for everything, I feel like it's important to have a system that allows you to approach every possible question. So I had frameworks that help me approach general cognitive questions, or I had frameworks that help me approach soft skills, frameworks that help me approach technical questions. And based on those frameworks, I may not know the answer. I may not know the answer for the question, but at least I had a tool that helped me tackle the question and get it and get somewhere. And in many of these interviews, the right answer doesn't really matter as much. What really matters is the thinking process that you develop to get to that answer. And that's pretty much my main tool to showcase that I have a complex and good thinking process. The frameworks that I had to throw at these questions.
Yeah, that's great. No, it always makes me think about IB. I don't know if you did the IB, but I studied in India and I did the IB for high school, and they make you detail out a list of steps. So even if your final answer is wrong, you get like partial points for, showing the working. And like it makes me think the same thing, that it's okay if your answer is wrong, but they can see if you're really on the right track there. So, a big question a lot of people have, been reaching out about is when you're in an interview and they say, "Do you have any questions for us?" Oftentimes students don't know what to say. And do you have anything that, you say there that's really helped you, or questions that have really, set you apart from other candidates?
Yeah, so I don't know how much that makes a difference from the interviewer side of things. I know it's always good to ask questions, of course. I just don't know truly, like in objective terms, how much that makes a difference of like, oh, this person asked a really good question and this person didn't, so we're gonna hire this person. I don't know how much of a difference that is, but I know it's always good to have questions, not only because it looks good, but it's also because it's a good opportunity to have an interesting conversation with the person that you're interviewing at. So of course you have the cliche of actually take the time to interview the employer that you're interviewing, right? So actually take the time to ask them questions about work-life balance or lifestyle or whatever at the company. Make sure that the company that you're interviewing for is a company that you would like to work at. And I think that's a really valid and genuine answer for someone who's interviewing at middle-sized companies or even small companies. But for someone who's interviewing at Google, like if you're going through the whole process, it's kind of implicit that you really want to work for that company. But I would still say use the time to talk to your interviewer about something that matters to you. So I
Mhm.
remember asking my interviewers a lot of things about Google's internal culture and some of the things that I was curious about or conflicted about, and went on to talk for even, I don't know, 5 to 10 minutes after my interview was done, just because the conversation itself was exciting. So more so than looking for the right thing to ask, just ask for things that truly matter to you, that truly seem interesting to you. Because if you just ask for questions that you looked up on the internet, like, oh, what are good questions to ask your interviewer, then it's going to look shallow, fake, and it's going to be absolutely pointless. Like, I actually use that time to have a meaningful conversation with your interviewer. Just to give an example, one of the questions that I asked out, because I was actually struggling with this, I continue to struggle with this, but I was struggling with this very hard throughout my interview process, was about imposter syndrome. So
Okay.
whenever I had an interviewer that was either a woman or an immigrant or a black person, I always talk to them about, hey, I'm an international student and I struggle a lot with my racial background and I feel like I'm an imposter or I don't feel representation in the tech industry because of my background. How do you deal with that? Because I'm assuming that they have also gone through similar challenges. And then we went to talk about imposter syndrome and how they dealt with that. And he gave me a couple, or he or she ended up giving me a couple of advice. So ask about things that truly matter to you, that are relevant to you.
No, I love that. That's such a great tip, and that's also such a great question. So, my other thing for you is this word cloud technical specialist. Big word, cool position. Could you just tell us a little bit about like what you're going to be doing next year? What does that position really look like?
Yeah, so the cloud technical residency at Google is a rotational program, is a 1 year long rotational program where you're going to be rotating through 3 different technical roles in the cloud. The roles that you're going to be rotating through are more on the client-facing side of things. Well, it sits right in between technology and client-facing. So it's pretty much helping clients take the biggest advantage of all the resources that Google Cloud has to offer. So pretty much talking to clients and saying, hey, these are the solutions that we can offer, or helping them actually design the solutions in Google Cloud. So we're going to be able to get a general sense of different industries in the cloud and different roles within the cloud industry, both from ranging from technical sales, straight up just selling and talking about the technical specs of selling to clients in the Google Cloud platform, all the way to working with existing clients and helping them design solutions with all the infrastructure that Google Cloud has to offer. So that's kind of the role that we're going to be playing. And again, it's a rotational program. It is also a cohort-based program. So we have a cohort that we're going to be working with. So a group of incoming cloud technical residents, which is something I'm super excited about, to build connections with my cohort. And after the first year, you end up getting outplaced to one of the positions, one of the rotations that you went through. So if you really perform very well as a solutions engineer, you're probably going to get, and if there's a need, a business need in the area, you may end up getting outplaced to a exclusive solutions engineer position. And well, it depends on the role, and depends on your performance and the business needs and whatever. But that's kind of a general overview of the program, a rotational program, 1 year long, and outplacement after the 1 year, and rotating through different positions in the cloud industry.
Super cool. Are you relocating somewhere, or is there a Google office where you are right
Yes,
now? Where are you moving?
yes. I'm currently in Sioux City, Iowa, which is in the west side of Iowa. Yeah, northwest side of Iowa or so. And I'm going to be relocating to Austin, Texas. We're set to start in August of 2021. So super excited to move to Austin and kind of, yeah, get into the Austin community. And yeah, no, super excited to be going to a city that is growing the way that Austin is growing right now.
Honestly, I feel like it's becoming another hub of like really cool tech space. So kind
Absolutely.
of like going out, what is like some advice you have for international students in 2021? I think a lot of students have been reaching out lately for a multitude of reasons. One being that, COVID and this pandemic has really affected everyone, and some people are feeling demotivated. So what is just any piece of advice you have for international students, or maybe just students in general who are going into the recruiting process in 2021?
Yeah. Um, Let me think. I would say for students that are going into the recruitment process now, it's just do what you gotta do. Like, I worked an insane amount and I studied an insane amount last semester. Um, I remember for like 3 months in a row, every day of the week, I would go to the library at 1 p.m. and I would leave at 12 a.m. So like, put down your head and work if you need to, and mostly if your chances of staying in the US depend on it, do what you gotta do. And it's not always, it doesn't always have to be like this. It's just a phase that you actually need to put in more work than usual. So heads down, work a lot, and stay motivated. Like, not only stay motivated, but like prepared to fail because it's gonna happen. But
Yeah.
if you keep putting in the work, if you keep making the effort, you're going to get somewhere that's going to pay off eventually. So that's my advice for anyone who's going into the recruitment process right now. Like, do what you gotta do. The main thing I would say in the interview process itself is not necessarily knowing everything, but at least knowing enough so that you can feel confident during the interview. And to me, for me to feel confident during the interview, I basically had to learn everything that I could possibly get asked. That was kind of my approach to it. And I'm just saying, do what you got to do in order to feel confident. Do what you got to do in order to get there and be able to feel like, yes, I can kill it. Don't let the process itself overwhelm you. Like, yes, work a lot, study a lot, but when it comes to interviews, try to stay grounded, try to stay mindful of the situation, and don't let the nerves get to you. But I would say the main advice that I have is not necessarily for people who are going into the recruitment process right now. Is for people who are just coming to the US or just thinking about coming to the US. And the main advice is start early. Start as early as you can. The progress that you're going to build in the US is going to compound over time. So start building connections, start learning how the system works, and start working on projects, start as early as you possibly can. I think one of the main reasons why I am where I'm at with a job lineup before even I graduated to work at Google in my dream company is because I started working on stuff back in 2017 when I didn't even knew that I wanted to get a job. So start as early as you can because all the progress that you're building over time is going to compound. I've been working on projects, startups. I've been trying to apply for multiple positions for a very long time, and I know that if I didn't have a network, if I didn't have any sort of portfolio, or if I've never worked on any projects, and I decided to basically magically start now my senior year, it wasn't going to be enough. So if you have the time, start as early as you can. It's going to compound.
That's great. Honestly, Sam, thank you so much for joining us and for opening our series. I think there's so many students out there who are going to be really motivated by your experience and take a lot of your advice to get ahead of the game and start early, to work hard, and to network and build real connections that'll help facilitate whatever your dream career is, and really stay in the US, which is the main goal for a lot of us. So thank you again for being here. It was such a privilege to chat, and best of luck at Google next year. So excited for you and for all the things to come.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. If any of you guys watching want to get a hold of me, just reach out to me on LinkedIn. Happy to do so. Or just get a hold of me on Twitter or Instagram, whatever. Happy to chat. And yeah, best of luck. And thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Great. We'll drop Sam's details in the comments or in the description box here on YouTube, and you guys can click through if you want to chat with him directly. All right. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you. Bye-bye.